So I'm going to start out with a spoiler alert. I mainly have two points today that on different levels. One is that the data revolution has just begun, and we don't really know what we don't know. And Karen, you said this is 10 years ahead, or like 8 years ahead from now, right? So we need to be prepared for the unknown. And then there's on the smaller level, because I completely agree, we should use a lot of variables for this. But how do we actually get my mom to participate in this? And I hope you understand the analogy. It's not like my mom is any certain interest of this. But yeah, just a little bit about me, because I'm the only one not academic here, I think. Almost. I have a background in behavioral economics and in machine learning. I started the quantified-self division in Denmark and the open data drinks division also in Denmark. And I co-founded KL7, where we are doing applied behavioral economics on finance, pharmaceuticals, and welfare innovation in the public sector. And then I've written a lot of books on data revolution and applied behavioral sciences. So I have no knowledge of neurology. I've studied human behavior from the empirical perspective instead for more than 10 years. And then I've done a lot of advisory on a lot of different variables studies, mostly in relation with uptake and compliance on methodology. So I want to start out with showing you 2 slides I actually made 7 years ago. So that was when everybody was started talking about big data and little data, and I was kind of annoyed by this because I'm not sure why this is so important, the size of the data or where they're coming from. But the next one is like the killer slide, because already then I was wondering, what if we actually took some of the big data and the little data and combined it? There might be something to gather around that. So from now I'm going to be a little what's called negative, you might say, but I'm sure we can get a lot out of this combination. But let's start with the one thing you all heard about, the data revolution and things like that. And I try to call it like the third wave of revolutions we had in modern human history. And the thing is that the first revolution was like amplifying our physicality, and the second revolution was amplifying our communicative skills, and now we are actually amplifying our brains. We are doing it on a cognitive level where we have no idea of knowing what to look for and where to find it, for that matter. And that's why I always say, if you claim that you understand big data, then it's because you have never understood a thing of it. What we need to do is look at this as the Galapagos, the new Galapagos for us. Just as Darwin discovered almost by incident, we're gonna find a lot of different things we never knew. Maybe we'll also start to study falsifications. But this means that we have to let go of some of the control of the applications, both in terms of what data to collect and the quality of them. But please always remember the metadata. They might, even the worst data might be extremely valuable. So I just need to know if there's a lot of errors in them. So this in terms also mean that we might not in 5 years be at a place where we have to develop a hypothesis before we start looking at the data. I don't know if you guys have read this book, but you certainly should. We might just get to a place where we can just ask the data to develop the questions to ask the data, if you I don't know if you've seen this study on cocktail effects from different drugs, and it was actually just done by looking at Bing searches. So they found out, nope, there was actually some sort of correlation between people who will search for this, for paroxetine and hypoglycemia. So we might not even be aware that we can find these things right now. And this leads us to the fact that what are we going to do with the causality and correlations? I know that right now you guys have to prove some sort of causality in this, but IASTI, which this slide is from, is a mathematical company from the US who have totally redefined the breast cancer, the scan for breast cancers, just based on correlations in the US. We get to a point where we might be able to ask research questions we are not sure that we don't know. It's the old Rumsfeld term, like saying unknown unknowns. Today we can ask the questions we don't know the answer to, but what if we don't know which questions to ask? That might be where we are heading. And in terms of that, reality mining is, I don't know if any of you guys work with it, but there's a lot of data around us, and I think that the collecting of the variables, the data from the variables might be helping us to do like imagine a broader picture around the patients. The constant example of this is Pendler at MIT saying that if you just look at the electrical bills at Wall Street prior to the financial crisis, we might have just discovered that every day the light was turned off just a little later and a little later and a little later. So I would like to propose that also look at what's inside the homes of people, the IoT stuff. Yeah, so that would be the basic big wheel. Would you claim to know which data you need in 5 years? And would you claim to know which question to ask the data? I think you should ask yourself that. And then on the my mom part, this is where we are starting to use the citizens as a sensor for our projects. I don't know if you've seen this, which they are trying to look for potholes in Boston with an app. And I think it's all well and fine, but but the thing is, who is going to run around with these apps open on their phone every day? We have this sort of picture of humans like this, like we are a product of mental executional functions. But the thing is that we are still dying because, oh, that was the wrong way. We're still dying because of our bad decisions. So I've done a lot on advising a lot studies on quantified self, and most of the times you can ask the researchers, have you actually tried running around with the device yourself for more than a day? And you would be amazed how often that hasn't happened. But we are still expecting everyone else to do it for us. And I'm not sure why we're doing this. Karen, how am I on time? Sorry.
It's okay. You have we have 10 minutes until Dalda will talk. So
okay.
Quite many questions.
Yeah. So
you can spend a little more time.
Yeah, just one last point. That is that that the quantified self movement is based on the insights through numbers. This means that we have some sort of idea that if we just give people the information they need, they are going to act accordingly. And well, most of you guys have seen that isn't really the case in the real world. this is a guy from Greece called Dukas. He wanted to be more active in his everyday, so he bought himself a Fitbit, getting to the 10,000 steps a day, but it didn't really work when he got the data. It didn't really push him to it. So at some point he just sat down, and then he hacked his Fitbit and connected it to his refrigerator. And if he hadn't done the 10,000 steps by 9 o'clock, then the refrigerator would just shut off for the night. And then the question to ask himself was really, do I want to clean out the kitchen tomorrow and the refrigerator and throw out all the food, or do I just take the 2,000 steps? Instead of the question being, do I take the 2,000 steps, or do I, well, just stay here on the couch? So we might need to build some sort of mechanisms to this, to look into third parties, to look into APIs and things like that. I'm just going to skip this whole thing. But I think that when you set up studies today, we have to, it's not just going to, don't have to ask your mom, but would you actually track the data yourself and give them to yourself? Well, and for how long would you do that? And would you react to the feedback? It's not just insight by numbers. We have to design a feedback loop that actually makes sense for people in their everyday lives. Yeah. On that note, in God we trust. All others bring data.
Thanks a lot, Simon. It's very good reflections. I think I'll just start with one question, and that's particularly this ending. We see it in a lot of also these citizen science-based research, where we have a high activity in the beginning, and then people are exhausted and they don't bring the data we want. And we have this idea that they can collect it. Do you have recommendations on how we build a system, or how we get people have the activity or to keep this high? That's not a refrigerator.
No, it really depends on like the context of the whole study. But the thing is, you sit down, then you do like some sort of system. What are we going to do? Are we going to pay them for bringing the data, or to actually be compliant in terms of our methodology, or don't we? But you have to look at what makes sense for them. It's not really doesn't make sense to them to give them back the data. And after that, you have to look at how do we make this variable. So if you look at every great product that's well, digital product made for keeping people addicted to it, then it's variable in time, what feedback they're getting. So it might be like just a simple lottery might work, and might be even better than giving people money. Yeah, but variation throughout times to actually keep them in it. Yeah.
Sorry, once again, variation?
Variable rewards on time. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because otherwise it's like some game you figured out. You figured out the game mechanics, and then it's not interesting anymore. So we saw how many variable products who was bought in the US, but I'm not sure that the percentage of use of the variable is that high.
This is maybe if you talk about quantified self, what do you call them, people in this movement. But what if we talk about patients? Would they like feel more empowered if they have these devices, or is it something that we think that, oh, if we give them these variable devices, they will be included in research and they will be happy and everyone will be happy?
Yeah. No, they will not. Most of the times when you think that this is the way to go, you have to think of yourself as experts. This is like, you guys are like economics trying to design a financial product for human beings, right? You're actually experts in this, so what you think is interesting, it's not really interesting for the rest of them. So if it was that easy, we could just like give every diabetic in Denmark one of these, and then they would be cured basically if it's type 2. But it's not working like that.
Thank you. I think I will see if there are other people who want to say something or have questions. Now, unfortunately, we didn't have Sarah, which is the only patient that we had in the panel, but maybe we have some of the others, maybe from the medical industry or patient organizations.
I'm Astrid Arnesen. I'm not a patient, but I'm representing Huntington's disease as a family representative for that disease. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, because I think it's very interesting things you are coming with, Simon, and I see from the talks here also there are two perspectives. The one is gathering information for research, for finding new hypotheses about how things work and what are the mechanisms of the brain's disorders. And the other is how can we monitor ourselves in order to prevent symptoms or to help ourselves live as good as we can. And we know for sure from human science that information does not really alter your behavior alone.
Thank you for this comment.
Maybe another comment. This is Philippe from Lausanne. I think here what we're seeing is that the broad panel that can be associated with this field of research. You can, on the one hand, get new knowledge about the association between some disease and some environmental factor that were previously not known because we were not having access to the data needed to make this kind of association. That's one thing. Then you have the other dimension, which is helping people to have a more healthy life through tracking their daily activity. And we're usually talking about physical activity. We heard the number of steps, and there might be other surrogates, but basically it has to do with notion and knowledge we know for a long time. I mean, we know that smoking is bad. We know that not having physical activity is bad for our health for the last 40 to 50 years. That knowledge does not necessarily translate into changing behavior. It has to some extent, but not as much as we would like. And it's each individual responsibility to decide whether or not they want to adapt their behavior to the well-known risk factor. And here, we can hope that the technology can enhance, by some different ways, our capacity to have a healthy life. But the third dimension, and that's what the one I emphasized before, was trying to help patients. Here, I think that we have to move away from just enhancing physical activity. It goes to much more specific issues. Like if we're talking about epilepsy, I want to use some of this device to detect a seizure and take protective measure when the seizure is detected. If I'm a patient with Parkinson's disease, I want to better control my disease state and its variation along the day to optimize my medical treatment that I might take up to 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 times a day for very advanced patient. If I'm a patient at risk of stroke, I would like to have a device that could tell me that within the next few weeks, I'm entering a zone of very high risk of stroke, and maybe I should review my treatment, etc., etc. And I could provide you with tons of examples. The point is that each of them is specific. It's not just relying on measuring physical activity. It goes much behind this, even though it could use the same physical biomarker to start with.
I completely agree with you.